If you ask 9 out of 10 ultralight backpackers what their go-to headlamp is, they're probably going to tell you it's this guy right here. This is the Nitecore NU 25 UL headlamp. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's quite the light for its compact size. The Nitecore NU 25 weighs in at a whopping 47 grams, and it has some pretty phenomenal features about it that make it very unique in the marketplace. A price tag of $39.99 made me wonder, can I do better out there? And that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be comparing this ever popular Nitecore light with a generic headlamp that I picked up that weighs 37 grams compared to the Nitecore's 47, has more light output, and I bought it for less than $19 for two. Before we get into that side-by-side comparison, let's talk about some of the basic features of the Nitecore NU 25. This light is currently retailing for $39.95. It's a decent price tag. I'll leave a link below if you want to check that out. It weighs 47 grams, and it has 3 basic light output settings. The highest, brightest setting is 400 lumens. Then there's a 200 lumen and a 60 lumen. It also has one special battery saver feature, but we'll talk about that later. In addition to your basic 3 lighting features, there is your standard red light for navigating at night and reading maps. I don't typically use the red lights, I don't see well with red light, so it's not something I pay that much attention to. So today we're going to focus on what the majority of us are going to deal with, and that's just the regular lighting output. The Nitecore, you'll notice it actually has 2 LEDs, which does give it a better dispersed, wider beam of light, which I think is great for navigating trails or campsites. We're going to be comparing the Nitecore NU 25 to this generic ultralight headlamp that I picked up. I cannot pronounce the name, so I will leave that link in the description also. But this is a 1,000 lumen ultralight headlamp. It has 2 basic light settings, 1,000 lumens or 400 lumens. You'll notice it's also a single LED instead of the double LED like the Nitecore. So it's a more of a narrower beam, but an amazing light output. Again, 1,000 lumens or 400 lumens. The light itself weighs in at a 37 grams. Incredibly lightweight. And the price tag is pretty awesome. You actually get 2 when you purchase them for $18.66, which means $9.33 will buy you a 1,000 lumen ultralight headlamp that weighs in at only 37 grams. But is that price too good to be true? And that's what we're going to check today. So what I did is I ran some light tests to find out if the battery life really is as great as these 2 different lights are advertising. And that's what we're going to take a look at. This Nitecore NU 25 was probably the hardest one for me to actually test because it kept dying when I wasn't watching it, and I'd have to do the time all over again. So I've actually been walking around with these different headlamps in my backpack, in my pocket, sitting on my nightstand, in my dresser, in my truck as I'm working for the last 2 weeks with the timer going on my phone to find out just how long does the battery life really last. So starting with the 400 lumens, Nitecore says that you're going to get 2 hours and 40 minutes of battery life. It took me 2 different tries. The first one I checked it at 2 hours and 30 minutes and the battery was dead. The second one I checked it at 2 hours and 43 minutes and that's when the battery was dead. I did check prior to that 2 hours and everything was great. So I know for a fact that this will last for at least over 2 hours and 20 minutes, but I never did actually get to the point where I watched it die. So I can't tell you if it actually makes it to that full 2 hours and 40 minutes, but it's close enough. What gets more interesting though is when you go down to the lighter settings on this one, the ones where we're going to stretch the lifespan out on the light, because let's be honest, nobody wants a headlamp that's only going to last 2 or 3 hours out there in the field. I ran into a case just a few weeks ago when I had to hike into my campsite in the middle of the night. My headlamp that I was using lasted for about 3 hours. That was barely enough time to get into camp, get things set up before the battery was dead. And it was kind of miserable. So what I'm looking for is a headlamp that's going to have that lasting long life where I don't have to worry about it sucking down my backup battery because I'm charging the thing every single day on the trail. So I looked at the lowest setting, that's that 60 lumen setting, thinking that this is probably the setting that I would use most often. It still gives you plenty of width because it's using both of the LEDs, and there's enough distance that I think you're able to see 30, 40 feet ahead of you without any issues. So Nitecore does say that this battery is going to last for 13 hours at that 60 lumen setting. Well, the first time I thought, okay, this will be great. I got it started at night. I tossed it into my nightstand, and in the morning I opened up the drawer and the battery was dead. So I have no idea how long it lasted. So the second time I tried it, I actually had it in my truck when I was driving around throughout the day, and I got just over 9.5 hours when it should have been a 13-hour battery. So I wasn't too thrilled. I thought maybe it's a glitch. So on the third test, I made sure that I had it on my hip or in my pocket with me throughout the day. And what I discovered is that a little after 6.5 hours, the light does noticeably dim, but it still has a really good output. And then just slightly over 9 hours, I think it was 9 hours and 20 minutes, 9 hours and 22 minutes, the light did die. And on the fourth test, it was right around there in the same range. It's about 9.5 hours. So you're not going to get the 13 hours that Nitecore is telling you you're going to get. Made me a little frustrated, right? Because why are we going to advertise something that we're just not going to get? So now I'm getting a little skeptical, which means we're going to try that mid-range setting, that 200 lumens. Remember, Nitecore says we're going to get 5 hours out of this 200 lumen setting. Well, I tested that one twice also, and I found it, yes, indeed. The light lasted just right about 5 hours. Once was a little under, once was a little over. It's true to its word. So what I have learned about this light so far, Nitecore does advertise that the highest setting is going to get you 2 hours and 40 minutes, and that's at 400 lumens. That seems to be pretty consistent. The mid-range at the 200 lumen setting for 5 hours, we're going to call that a win also. The lower setting at 60 lumens that's advertised for 13 hours, I didn't ever get to 10 hours on it, so substantially less than what it's advertising, but still a long battery life. Now, remember, I told you that Nitecore also had a special feature we were going to talk about, and that is a battery extender saver mode setting. It still runs the headlamp, but it's at a significantly reduced output, and that's at 6 lumens. Now, I know what you're thinking. 6 lumens is insane. Why would you even waste your time? Isn't that just like a glow-in-the-dark nightlight? Well, I tested it around, bumping around my house. I haven't taken it out camping yet because I haven't had a chance. But at 6 lumens, that gives me enough light output that I can comfortably read in bed. It gives me enough light output that I can pick out my wardrobe without waking up my wife in the morning. And it gives me enough output that I would feel completely safe walking around camp. Would I do any major hiking? No. But I wouldn't be afraid to stay on trail if it was a trail I knew. So at 6 lumens, I'm comfortable with it. And Nitecore advertises that this light will last for 48 hours with 6 lumens. And that is amazing. Can you think about that? A headlamp that you could use, worry-free a battery that's going to last for 48 hours. I put that to the test also. And we'll talk about that once we're done comparing the generic light, because it doesn't have anything like that, so it doesn't seem fair to compare the two. So when I tested our generic headlamps, I actually tested these at the same time because I wanted to rule out any glitches between manufacturing, because I know lights are going to be different from light to light, but I wanted to pull some averages. So again, remember, they tell us that there's a 1000 lumen output and a 400 lumen output. At the 1000 lumen setting, both of these lights performed phenomenally. Both of these lights lasted over 5 hours on that 1000 lumen setting. So think about that, 1000 lumens for 5 hours. I tested them twice. They both were pretty consistent. At about 4.5 hours, the light dimmed just slightly. By 5.5 hours, the lights were dead. I think the longest running time I got was 5 hours and 27 minutes. And again, I don't know which one it was, but they were very consistent. So I was very pleased with the battery life at 1000 lumens, because that is insanely bright. Even though it's a single LED bulb, which means it's a narrower line, it was still enough output that it's like turning on, the lights in your kitchen. You can walk around in the pitch black and see everything. If I was hiking on a trail, I would have no concerns of being able to see, dozens and dozens of meters ahead with no concern. Now on the lower setting, which was 400 lumens, now this is that direct comparison with the Nitecore, because remember, Nitecore's maximum output is 400 lumens. The minimum output on these lights is 400 lumens. So at the 400 lumen setting, I wore this thing on my forehead, walking around the house for, again, an afternoon, tossed it into my nightstand drawer when I went to bed, opened it up 7.5 hours later, and the battery was dead. So this is when I needed to really realize, Jeremy, you can't run these tests when you're sleeping. So I've had to do all of these during the daytime hours. The second time I ran the lights, I noticed at 5 hours, the lights noticeably dimmed, and then by 7 hours, they were both dead. I ran it a third time just to pull out any variables, and I got very similar results. I believe the longest time I got on them at the 400 lumen setting was 7 hours and 15 minutes. Pretty impressive if you ask me. These lights also have, the basic red light. Again, I'm not going to navigate with a red light or read maps, so I didn't test those features. They do have an SOS setting, so it'll different pulsing flashes depending on how you turn it on. And it's got a really neat battery indicator. So as you're using the light, it lets you know where the battery percentage is at in the life of the battery. It also lets you know as it's charging. So let's talk about these two lights in their similarities, right? And that's that 400 lumen mark. Nitecore's maximum output is 400 lumens. The minimum output of our generic light is 400 lumens. Nitecore gets an impressive 2 hours and 40 minutes of runtime. Our generic light gets 7 hours and 15 minutes of runtime. Think about that for a minute. Same light output of 400 lumens, 2 hours and 40 minutes, or 7 hours and 15 minutes. $39.99, $18.66 for two. Now, when you just think about it like that, it makes you go, well, that's a no-brainer. Why would I spend 40 bucks when I could spend $19 and get two lights, and it triples the battery life with the one light, right? 7 hours versus 2.5 hours. It's a crazy difference. Well, Nitecore has one feature that I haven't found on any other lights that just might make you say, I'm willing to deal with that reduced battery life because of the feature. And that's the piece I want to talk about. So Nitecore advertises that at their 6 lumen setting, you're going to get 45 hours of battery life. That means you can use this light at its lowest setting for an entire week out there on the trail and never have to worry about charging it. That means you could save that precious, precious battery life in your 10,000 milliamp battery for your phone or your Garmin or whatever other devices you're carrying with you and not have to worry about the headlamp. That means you could keep this thrown in your backpack, never worrying about the charge, just pulling it out, knowing that you've got the life you need on it. But is that a legitimate time? Because I'm very skeptical, right? After doing the tests on the 400, the 200, and the 60, the settings just weren't as great as Nitecore advertised. So we put it to a test. And this one was a lot easier for me to test because I just got back from a road trip, which means I spent a lot of time in a hotel and a lot of time in my truck where nobody would look at me weird for having a headlamp on in the middle of the day. But what I did learn over the 3 different tests that I did, I averaged roughly 40 to 41 hours of battery life. So again, not the advertised 45 hours that Nitecore brags about, which again is kind of frustrating. So why do manufacturers give you these false ranges that they know aren't attainable? Just be honest with us, because 40 hours of runtime on a battery at 6 lumens, that's still phenomenal. But is it enough for you to decide, I want a 6 lumen headlamp that I'm never going to have to worry about charging on my backpacking trip, and I'm willing to spend $40 for it? Or are you going to spend $18.66, get 2 headlamps that weigh less, and the battery runs for 3 times as long? It just doesn't have that extended life setting, which means after your 7 hours of battery life is up, you're going to have to charge that thing. So you may have to charge it once if you're out there for a 3-day trip. I'm going to let you folks decide what is best for you. For me, I'm still on the fence. I love the security of knowing that my Nitecore is going to be there. I love the fact that I know that I don't have to worry about charging on the 6 lumens, but can you really beat the price tag of this generic light? I don't know. Let me know. What do you folks think? Should we go for the trusted, tried and true Nitecore that's a $40 headlamp, or go the generic route for $18.66?